Hello, everyone. I call the meeting to order. Before starting, I would like to remind all members and participants about the important preventive measures that should be applied.
Incidents that can cause injuries. All in-person participants are reminded to keep their pieces away from all microphones at all times. As you're aware, the following measures have been taken to help prevent audio feedback incidents. We're now using a black earpiece, which are of higher quality. Please use those. By default, all unused earpieces will be unplugged at the start of a meeting. When you're not using your earpiece, please place it face down in the middle of your sticker for this purpose, which is generally on your right on the table. And please consult the cards on your table for guidelines to prevent audio feedback incidents. The room layout has been adjusted to increase the distance between microphones and reduce the chance of feedback from an ambient earpiece. And these measures, of course, are in place so we can conduct our business without interruption and to protect the health and safety of all participants, with a special attention to our interpreters. Merci à tous pour votre coopération.
Thank you all for your cooperation. Today, the committee is undertaking a study of committee business.
Some of you are aware or piecing together. I'll start with ArriveCAN. For our study on ArriveCAN, the following witnesses have declined our invitation. Harriet Soloway from the Office of the Public Sector Integrity Commissioner of Canada, John Osowski, Paul Gerard, as well as the RCMP. I think correspondence have been sent to you on at least 3 of these 4. We'll send you the 4th one once that is translated as well. The Ethics Commissioner has not declined, but has indicated that they're not available till June, and of course I'm prepared to work with that. So I'm going to move into a discussion. Mr. Nader, I'll recognize you first.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate the update from you. I'll make my remarks very brief, and I do have a motion, but I think it's unfortunate when witnesses decline. Sorry, Chair.
Point of order, Mr. Nader. Yes, Ms.
Thanks, Chair. Sorry, my apologies if I haven't kept up with the notes here, but I realized that in our notice of meeting, we're supposed to be in camera, but I noticed that we're not in camera. Can you just explain that real quick?
I'll have the clerk explain that. I believe the line is in camera for the in-camera business, but perhaps I'll have the clerk speak to that since I don't have the notice right in front of me.
The notice was redistributed this afternoon and published to the website. The top header indicates that it's webcast for the first portion, and we'll be moving in camera for the second portion.
Thank you. Mr. Nader, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. So again, just briefly, I think it's unfortunate when witnesses decline. I mean, obviously an invitation means an invitation, but I think, as you've mentioned, it's slightly stronger than a simple invitation. And I think the 2 individuals that I'm most concerned about are John Osowski, who was the president of the CBSA during the time period of ArriveCAN, and Paul Gerard, who was mentioned very clearly in the testimony of Mr. Firth at the bar. I think those 2 individuals in particular are very key to our study. And so I would like to move a motion that John Osowski and Paul Gerard be summoned to appear before the committee on Thursday, May 16, 2024, in relation to the study on Report 1, ArriveCAN, of the 2024 reports of the Auditor General of Canada. I believe the clerk does have that motion in both English and French and can distribute it. Very simply, I'll just say a couple sentences to it. I think when we have key witnesses who are refusing to come, that have key testimony related to this study, they ought to be required their attendance. And I think I would have hoped, frankly, that Mr. Firth's testimony at the bar might have been a cautionary tale to those who would rather decline the authority of Parliament. But I think that at this point we have to move to a summons for those 2 individuals. And I will leave my comments there, Chair, because I don't want to eat up any more time of this committee. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I've checked my email and I see that motion has been sent out. I'll recognize, just give me 1 second. I'm just going to say a couple things off the top. Mr. Nader, I do note in your motion that you're giving it a 1 week. That is fine. In fact, I have just so folks don't begin to go down the path and debate the timing. It is my intention to have a meeting next Thursday anyway with this committee, with witnesses that have already been agreed to by the committee. So regardless of what happens to this motion, we will be meeting next Thursday at 10 in the morning with witnesses. That motion, that notice we sent to you once the witnesses are confirmed, and I have the paperwork in, and we're working on that right now. So without further ado, Ms. Shanahan, you have the floor. And Mr. Desjardins, I do see your hand up, and I'll go to you next. Yes, Ms. Shanahan.
Yes, in your opening remarks, you mentioned the Public Sector Integrity Commissioner, and I think you gave some information around ethics. Could you just go into the reasons why each one of these witnesses, what their responses were, and where they sit?
I will summarize them briefly. So the Office of the Public Sector Integrity Commissioner of Canada, and again, you have correspondence, you have the full letter, is currently doing an investigation of ArriveCan and felt it would be best not to appear. So I will leave it. I will let you dive into the letter to see in detail. Mr. Osowski, again, there's correspondence on that. I don't want to prejudice, but feels he does not need to appear. Mr. Gerard, similarly, and as well, claims he has a medical issue he's dealing with, and I've already preemptively asked for information on that. The RCMP, you have correspondence on that as well. Mr. Desjardins, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank our Conservative colleagues for bringing this forward. I will, of course, accept this motion. However, Chair, I'm getting more concerned about the cost to taxpayers that these surprise meetings are having. I know, like, we've had many of these meetings which send MPs from their home riding. We're all going home on Friday. Big flights that the taxpayer pays for all of the Conservative members and everybody to go home. And then we pay for those flights again just for sitting for 2 hours. I think it's a concern to taxpayers that in a Conservative-controlled committee that we're continuously piling on these costs to taxpayers over and over and over. And so I'm fully in favor of the motion, but I think we can actually do this work during regular times that we have resources and MPs are gathered. I appreciate Mr. Nader's comment and his motion, but I don't appreciate the tax burden that this is continued, or the cost to taxpayers these extra meetings continue to put on everybody. And so I'd ask the Conservatives to think about that, the impact to taxpayers. We're in an affordability crisis right now. It's a very important issue, and we're talking about the cost to taxpayers, but how can the Conservatives continue to justify these extreme expenses? We're talking like thousands of dollars to host these meetings for 2 days, to fly Conservatives into Ottawa, to have all the interpreters, to have all this work, the thousands of dollars. We must be approaching hundreds of thousands of dollars on extra meetings that could be done during regular business hours because the Conservatives here. And so, Chair, I think if I find it appropriate that we should start documenting these extra associated costs. So I'd like to amend Mr. Nader's motion to include a cost analysis of any meeting or that meeting to Canadian taxpayers. And I'll give you notice that in any other surprise meetings that are going to be burdened by the taxpayer, I'll be asking for a cost breakdown and analysis for these costs, because I want to be able to make sure that we're being reasonable with the money we're spending on behalf of Canadians. We have a meeting all day today that we could be talking about this. We could be talking about it in a week from now. We have 2 more meetings scheduled. So I just want to make sure that we're doing best value for Canadians here.
So, Mr. Desjardins, can I just get some language in? So you would like to make an addition that says what? You'd like the analyst to provide, you'd like the clerk, you'd like the chair to provide an estimate of the meeting cost?
Yeah, the extra meeting costs, yeah. and
see.
whether or not members will be attending in person or virtually, because of course that's about, for some of these members, it's thousands of dollars extra, right, to be able to fly all the way over here. Like we're talking like 50 grand, 100 grand if we start flying everybody back from their constituencies when it's a non-city
Sure.
meeting.
So
I
you
think
like the
Canadians
amendment?
are concerned about it.
The amendment is to provide a cost
breakdown. And
estimate.
this could be also maybe not a motion, but I just want the chair to take into consideration my concern about extra costs like this and the impact to our budgets. And so if you can please tell us before we vote on these extra meetings how much it's costing the taxpayer, that would give me, and I think Canadians, a fair estimation as to why we continue to have extra meetings, because I think we have to balance the cost of these things. You know, I know this work's important and I support the motion, but these costs I'm getting nervous about. You know, we're doing studies on cost of living, we're doing studies on affordability, and I agree with those things, but we're also impacting the taxpayer here. Okay. And I think the Conservatives of most people should take this into better consideration.
Okay. So, Mr. Desjardins, so I need to be clear, because I think you said maybe deal with it with the budget afterwards. So is there an amendment, and what is the amendment? It is to provide this committee with the summary of the cost of the meeting?
The costs of extra meetings, yeah.
Well, let's just deal with this meeting. I mean, unless you, I mean,
like you call the meetings, right, Chair?
Why don't
costs associated with
well,
them, correct?
So you can either add it on to this motion. You can come back with a fresh motion, I suppose, that is universal. But it seems right now you're asking for the cost of this Thursday meeting. Is that right?
Well, of all meetings that are not regularly scheduled, this is a regularly scheduled meeting.
Okay.
Mr. Nader of the Conservative Party is asking to spend more money and to have
No,
another meeting
Mr.
during
Nader is not actually asking to spend more money. I've already said there will be a meeting next Thursday.
Is it
So I'm
free?
asking.
Is it free
I am
next year?
calling this committee back next Thursday. Period.
But how much is that? That's an extra cost.
Okay.
Chair.
Yeah, just tack it on.
How much is it going to cost
All
the
right.
taxpayers to cost the next meeting?
So let's agree on some wording, Mr. Desjardins. Your amendment is that the committee provide members with the cost, with an estimated cost of the meeting.
Yeah, that'd be great. I think that would go a long ways to show just how important these meetings are and to try to balance our decisions with the cost breakdown for Canadians. Because Canadians expect us to be frugal, they expect us to be reasonable, they expect to use the money for really good reasons. And I appreciate the Conservative motion. I'm going to support it. Okay. But like, we got to be more reasonable. We got to actually look at the bottom line for regular people here.
Just okay. Just pause for 1 second, Mr. Desjardins. I'm going to make sure the analyst or the clerk has my words, which you, I think, agree with, and then we can keep moving. So I have a list here already. Ms. Khalid will be next, but just 1 sec, please. All right. Ms. Khalid, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chair.
And I say we are now debating the amendment. Pardon me.
And that's exactly what I was going to talk about, Mr. Chair. I appreciate you preempting me. So, again, I really take Mr. Desjardins' point here. The challenge here is, we are talking about costs, but we're also talking about members' times and times in our constituencies. And yes, we do spend significant amounts of money in coming here, but then there's also that aspect of having surprise meetings. I mean, on this one, we had an opportunity to discuss this in the subcommittee meeting, and then we had an opportunity to discuss this in the surprise Monday meeting that we had, which was a very, very short one. And yet, here we are on a Thursday evening, planning our weeks out in our constituencies, and now being told that, hey, we have another surprise meeting on a Thursday. We are facing what is 5 back-to-back sitting weeks in Ottawa for after this Constit week. And we will be here. we should be, Chair, using our allotted resources in a responsible manner. And 100% agree with what Mr. Desjardins is saying, that responsibility is fiscal. It's about taxpayer dollars and how much work are we able to come and do here for 2 hours just so that, you're able to have these surprise meetings that completely honestly could be scheduled during the sitting weeks as well, while we're here, while we're doing the work. Now, you have the opportunity to schedule in extra meetings while we're in Ottawa as well. But you're choosing to bring us back on a constit week. And I really find that to be a misuse of government resources, of the House of Commons, resources, and of taxpayer dollars in transporting members, especially the Conservative members, and in bringing them back here to Ottawa for those meetings. So I absolutely agree with Mr. Desjardins' amendment. I think that should definitely be there, and that we should make that a consistent thing as well, so that we do recognize that when surprise meetings happen, taxpayers should know what the cost is to them to have an hour-long meeting where we're bringing in people from all across the country to sit here and do the work that we could have done during a sitting week. But this is not a 106.4. This is a meeting called by you at your discretion, Chair, and I completely respect your discretion. I would appreciate if you could be a little bit more judicious with taxpayer dollars in the discretion that you're taking to call meetings, and especially on a surprise. And I've said this time and time again, Chair, can we please be a little bit more collaborative when we're scheduling meetings? Can we please be a little bit more efficient while we're here in Ottawa to get that work done? You called a surprise meeting for Monday afternoon. It was a very, very short one. It used government House of Commons resources. And yet here we are dealing with another surprise meeting. So I will lay that there, and I'm absolutely in support of Mr. Desjardins' motion. Thank you.
Thank you. I will turn to, let me just, so we don't keep bringing it up, I will just gently, these witnesses, their refusal was not known to me Monday. This has happened over the course of this week. And I believe the clerk's been sending the correspondence to you as we've received it and as we've, right away, if it came in both official languages or as soon as possible, once it was translated. I've addressed the issue of trying to get additional resources during the weeks. It is very, very difficult. I'll say nothing more on that because I don't want to become part of the debate here. I do see you're on the list, Ms. Shannon. Mr. Stewart, you have the floor. Oh, well, you were both, so I have you 1 and 2. So, Mr. Nader, you go ahead.
Go ahead.
Very briefly, Chair, and actually I was going to make the point that resources during sitting weeks are actually incredibly difficult to come by. We've seen committee meetings having to be canceled because of lengthy committee meetings in other committees, so it is difficult to make that. So I will make that point first. We all have things we need to do in our ridings, and there's no question about that, and it is a challenge. That said, we are parliamentarians, we are legislators, so committee business, committee work is a key part of our job. We do have the option of hybrid sittings for those who prefer not to. And then I would just say briefly to Mr. Desjardins' point about the cost, I would just indicate that I would hope that the cost analysis are the incremental costs of an additional meeting, not the costs that would already be baked in that would occur whether this House is sitting or not, or whether the House is sitting on a break week or not. Obviously, some costs are borne by each of our individual MOBs, some costs are borne by our TSEAs. So obviously, I would be looking for that for the incremental costs that would be to the additional a meeting on a break week. So that's all I'm going to say. I really don't want to waste too much time of the committee's work here.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Stewart, do you wish to speak? Yes, that's you have the floor.
I can
yes.
just. Yeah. I guess what I was going to say earlier, I agree with Mr. Nader on the incremental part, and I think it's unfortunate, for all of us when people at the last minute decide that they don't want to show up to committee. It causes clerks, analysts, chairs. It causes disruption in all of our lives, and for that matter, one of the things that I think I would say is, This is a very unique project. We know that it's cost over $60 million, and we know that some of the individuals that are declining our invitations to come here, we know that they were specifically named in documentation and that essentially were believed to have aided GC Strategies in receiving these big scandalous contracts. So as a committee member, regardless of which party affiliation we have here today, it's very important that we get to the bottom of where that money went to and how it was achieved. And I don't think it's the chair's fault or anybody in here's fault. People simply don't want to show up because they've been named, you know, and that's too bad. We have a role to play to keep people accountable, and that shouldn't be any different for them. And that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Mr. Desjardins, then Ms. Shanahan, puis après ça, Madame Gaudreau. Mr. Desjardins, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I agree. ArriveCan's been brutal. Since 2011, $1 billion of contracts, according to the most recent supply from our request for information. Since 2011, that's Conservatives and that's Liberals. And so I'm very concerned about this, you know, as a new member of the New Democratic Party. Especially, I'm really concerned about this. So I really want to investigate this issue. But what I'm concerned about is the underlying nature of extreme expenses being borne by our committee to actually do this work. It seems ironic and in conflict to me to one hand tell Canadians we care so much about taxpayer money and how important it is. And I agree with that sentiment, but I also practice that sentiment, which is not what I'm seeing in this committee so far. What I've witnessed is when it's convenient, like look at the motion itself. Mr. Nader's motion speaks specifically to a time where resources we're not even sitting. It names a date out of the blue where we're not sitting, where we're in our communities. And so I appreciate his comment as well, respectfully, on aggregate costs, quote unquote, aggregate costs or whatever that was. It's important that Canadians we are transparent with all the costs associated and borne against taxpayers. It's not my MOB. This is taxpayer money at the end of the day, no matter what. No matter what, Mr. Chair, I want every single dollar accounted for the extra meetings that the Conservatives and the Conservative Whip's office, this is because this is a big party thing. The Whip's office has asked the Conservative members of this committee to not think of these motions in their own mind, but to think of this as a matter of partisan interest. That's the part I'm upset about. I'm upset that we're spending money for partisan interest, and Canadians are being, are being tricked by that. Look at the motion. It was moved by Mr. Nader to spend a bunch of more money to fly everybody in next week when we're not even sitting. My God, I want every single dollar, Chair, accounted for. If members fly in, I want to know the costs of those members flying to Ottawa on taxpayer dollars dime to have a meeting that we have resources for today. We had resources for on Tuesday. We had resources for on Monday. We have scheduled 2 more meetings in 2 weeks on Tuesday. We have 2 more meetings after that. The week after that, we have 2 more regularly scheduled meetings. The week after that, we have 2 more scheduled meetings. The week after that, Mr. Chair, we have 2 more scheduled meetings. Actually, I missed one. The week after that, we have 2 more scheduled meetings. Canadians are fed up with this, Mr. Chair. They're fed up listening to parliamentarians spend all their money because the Conservatives' Whip's office really wants that. Shame. It's a shame that you're spending money and playing games with Canadian taxpayers' dollars. Come on, guys. Let's get serious here. Honestly. And I'm trying to work across the aisle here to actually get value for Canadians. Mr. Chair, I hope you can take this seriously. I'm honest about this. Stop spending a bunch of money. You know what? We have all these meetings. We have all these meetings. We have over a dozen meetings scheduled. They have on our calendar. They're all empty right now. Half of them are empty meetings. Let's schedule one of those. Mr. Nader, I'm happy to support your motion, but please think about the Canadian taxpayers. It's serious, this stuff.
Thank you, Mr. Desjardins. Ms. Shanahan, you have the floor.
And I have to thank Mr. Desjardins for this amendment because I don't think it's lost on us. We're public accounts. We rail against government departments week in, week out for accountability and how they spend their money and making better choices, et cetera, et cetera. And here we are in a situation, it's not the first time, it's not the second time, it's multiple times now, that we've, I think, up until a certain point, we're working together to either through the subcommittee or the committee to come to ground on our calendar, on how work would be allocated out. I think this is something like, we're talking about on ArriveCan, something like 15 meetings and counting, over 65 witnesses. I have the calendar, which I asked for this Monday, and I was very happy to see it and thinking, oh, we're going to have new reports from the Auditor General. We're going to be able to deal with those reports, hopefully, but certainly looking forward to actually getting some reports out the door, and that's not happening. So I am definitely supportive of this amendment. I think that the public needs to know. I think public accounts needs to be transparent and say exactly how much it costs. And I think it's going to shed some light on some of the other work or some of the mismanagement, let's say, of committee work that we can be seeing across Parliament. I think Canadians would be very surprised, and certainly the duplication of work, because when I see the list of witnesses, and thank you for giving us a summary of why I was like, why were we calling these witnesses when Ethics Committee is running its own studies, so that would be the Integrity Commissioner and the Ethics Commissioner. And how is it? I mean, I don't see the letter from Paul Girard. You said it had to do with medical information. Maybe it's in translation, but then how is Mr. Nader able to make a motion? How is it that some members here have privileged information before other members? So it's very concerning. And again, I, for one, certainly support the amendment that's been brought to this motion.
Merci beaucoup. Puis suivant, la députée Gaudreau.
Thank you, Ms. Gaudreau. Microphone, please. On the sub-amendment, taxpayers have a right to know where their money is going. They're probably wondering if there's going to be a vote on this, because then they'll have to think about the time that is taken up in committee on that. The time taken up on obstruction, on dilatory actions. I am not a big fan of filibustering and partisanship. If we're in agreement, let's vote. We'll have a result, whatever that result is. So when it comes to witnesses who don't want to show up, suddenly there's a scandal. I think, honestly, we could be done with this motion within about 5 minutes. I'm here to look at these reports and to move forward. When you keep repeating yourselves, that costs money too. Thank you.
And to say something, and then okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Once again, it seems that ArriveCan is causing some random health problems amongst some of the most unruly, uncooperative, and disruptive witnesses who clearly don't want to be held accountable by this committee. I think the few dollars that we spend on behalf of the taxpayer to find out why $60-some million of their money disrupted their lives while people got contracts from the very people that are declining their invitations, I think it speaks volumes. So again, I'll support the motion as long as it's incremental, as Nader said, but I want to repeat this again. These are unruly witnesses, and there's a very good reason that they're declining our invitation, because they're guilty of something.
Just one second, Mr.
Knows
Stewart. I have a point of order.
Yeah, I'd just like to hear Mr. Stewart on the
No,
amendment.
you can add yourself to the list. That's not a point of order, asking for a point of clarification. Oh, relevance.
You
Oh,
made
that's
it very
different. Oh,
clear.
okay.
You made it very clear that we were to speak on the amendment.
Pardon me. Pardon me. I thought you were looking to ask a question of Mr. Stewart. Mr. Stewart, are you? I think you're done. I'm going to move to.
I think I was building some statement around my support of the amendment, so long as it tends to the incremental aspect that Mr. Nader put forth.
Well, look, I am. The motion is clear, and I will be. I see Mr. Desjardins. The motion is clear, or pardon me. The amendment to the motion is clear, and the analysts will do their job without further guidance, unless they come back to us and seek it. But I am not. I will not be dictating to them based on the transcript. They can refer to this, and if the questions, they'll come back to us. How does that sound? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. William.
Pardon me, Mr. Desjardins. Pardon me, Mr. Desjardins. I thought your hand was up from before. Mr. Desjardins had his hand up. So let me turn to Mr. Desjardins, and I'll come back to you. Yes, Mr. Desjardins.
No, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'm opposed to this idea of an incremental cost to try to find a way to hide public tax dollar expenditure just because the Conservatives want a trip to Ottawa on a week we're not in Ottawa. I'm opposed to that. We need to actually be transparent. This is the Transparency Committee. My goodness, I want to know every single dollar that goes into this expenditure. I'm against any kind of approach that would have Mr. Stewart hide how much it costs for taxpayers to ship him over here. I want to know exactly how much it costs the taxpayers to do that. Every single one of it. I want every dollar, Mr. Chair, that goes into these extra meetings, because taxpayers are frustrated about the cost of living crisis. They're frustrated that parliamentarians get to sit around a room and talk about the fact that since 2011, the Conservatives and the Liberals spent almost $1 billion in subcontracts. No, someone could look at that. For example, Mr. Stewart and Mr. Nader, I suggest that you look at Appendix B, contract values for GC Strategies, Dalian and Cordix. Since 2011, your government under Harper and Justin Trudeau's government cost us $1 billion.
Mr. Desjardins, let's come back.
So I'm happy to do this work, Mr. Chair, but I'm not happy wasting Canadian taxpayer dollars.
Fair enough, Mr. Desjardins. I would prefer we not go down and try to overly define the analyst's work. I think the amendment is before the table, and while there's been some voicing from the official opposition as well as others, I think the amendment to the motion is clear. Mr. Desjardins, I mean, for example, you're not asking for like the cost of the air conditioning to be included, because I think, as the Conservatives would say, that's part of running the building. But you're talking about the actual cost of running the meeting. And I think that's clear, and I think the analysts will pull together a cost estimate for us as best they can. On that note, I'm going to turn to Mr. Sabera, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Mr. Williamson, if I don't recollect, and I'm from the finance industry as well, and I believe you served in various capacities where you examined the use of taxpayer dollars and expenditures from the federal government. So I think you are just as committed as I am to ensuring that we utilize the funds of the taxpayers in the most efficient manner and in the most proper manner. You know, like yourself, I believe well, I've served for a number of years in this Parliament, like many of us here, and I think you served before coming back, if I remember correctly, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. To have a meeting during a non-sitting week, yes, happens through a 106.4, or if there's something of urgent paramount. But I'm really just quite surprised about just having a meeting and pulling it out. Also, we've received correspondence from the two individuals in terms of their two situations, so I'm not too sure where we're going with that. So I'm really kind of at a loss why we would utilize the resources of the House on a non-sitting week when, as other members have commented, we will be here for 5 weeks in a row, or I take it minus the Monday of the Victoria Day long weekend, and there'll be ample opportunities to meet on various topics that the committee deems itself to be important, because we know that the committee is the master of its own domain, and is you as chair at this current moment. So I'm really trying to grasp at why we need to use resources, and I applaud the member from the Democratic Party for referencing the use of taxpayer money and so forth, and how we must be judicious in that on that front. So I do want to mention that.
Thank you very much. Yes, Ms. Shanahan.
Yes, I see that I have the letter from Mr. Girard in my box. We got it at 3:54, something like, 10 minutes ago. So how is it that Mr. Nader had a motion prepared talking about the appearance of Mr. Girard? Special powers? Special powers? Yeah. No, I think there's... Chair, I'm very concerned here. It's not fair to all members of this committee that some members have access to information before others.
It's a question of privilege.
It is a question of privilege.
I don't like that camera angle on my face.
Anything else? Okay, thank you. Could you call the vote on the amendment to the motion, please?
Shall the amendment proposed by Mr. Desjardins carry? Ms. Bradford?
Yes.
Mr. Sorbera?
Yes.
Ms. Khalid?
Yes.
Ms. Shanahan? Yes. Ms. Yip?
Yes.
Mr. Nader?
Yes.
Mr. Stewart?
Yes.
Mr. Schmale? Yes. Madame Gaudreau? Mr. Desjardins?
Yes.
10 yeas.
That amendment to the motion is passed. We now return to the motion as amendment, which you will see in your inbox, which includes Mr. Nader's motion as well as the NDP amendment to that. Yes, Ms. Khalid.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to propose another amendment to delete the date of Thursday, May 16th, and to replace it with Thursday, May 23rd.
Point of order, Chair.
Is it an actual, what's the point of order is?
Well, the point of order is then if the date is changed, it then negates the amendment that we just passed, because then it becomes a normal meeting, so there is no cost analysis required for that.
Wow, I agree with that. Good job, Terminator. Did the Conservatives say there's no cost to that one? Wow.
So well, Mr. Nader does raise an interesting point. The amendment will stand at the risk of bumping the meeting we currently have scheduled for the 23rd is the Canadian Net Zero Emissions Accountability. So you are kind of addressing one of the challenges the chair has. Pardon me?
Transport.
Oh, pardon me. It bumps the likely or the proposed scheduling of the auditor's report on transportation corridors, which is currently scheduled for the 23rd. I suppose in doing this, the member is kind of pointing out one of the challenges I have. We only have so much space, so if you prefer to do this, if you prefer to have not one meeting with witnesses but two arrive we can do that, but it's going to move others down or off the agenda at least until the summer. So that is the amendment. That is the amendment to change the date to June 23rd. Pardon me, May 23rd. But it will impact on another study that the government had requested. Yes.
My apologies, I had an outdated version of the work plan. If it's okay with you, I'd like to change the 23rd to perhaps the 28th or the 30th.
And so your amendment is to
change the date from what is currently proposed in the motion to the 30th, I'll say.
So are you proposing a by or a date?
Pardon?
Are you proposing a by, like by?
No, I'm proposing it for
May
that
3rd.
date. I'm proposing it for that date.
Which one?
May 30th.
May
30.
I have an ArriveCAN scheduled meeting then that the subcommittee agreed to and this committee, and it'll be very difficult to move that. Those witnesses have been very hard to secure. We have been waiting for a month for that.
Well, Chair, I mean, I'm looking at the calendar. There's a number of open slots on June 11th, on the 13th, the 18th, the 20th.
Well, I'm asking you for a date. I'm telling you why the dates you're proposing doesn't work. You're bumping into a government meeting, then you're bumping into another meeting that has been approved by this committee. And I will reiterate, we are meeting next Thursday, so we can do it all at once and get it done, or we can have 2 meetings.
So, Chair, to clarify, if we don't have this motion or the date proposed in this motion, if it still passes, or whether it passes or not, we're still going to be meeting on
Correct.
the Thursday. And what would be the agenda for that meeting?
It is a witness this committee has approved, but I'm not at liberty, because I don't believe I'm at liberty to announce that person, because it is not all tied together, but it is in course of getting it done. But I can rest assured, it is a witness that this committee has approved, subject to the motion that was passed.
All right, then I withdraw my amendment, Chair.
Okay. Mr. Desjardins, on the amendment as amended.
Thank you very
Pardon me,
much.
as the motion as
Chair?
amended, pardon me.
Oh, no, that's all right. Thank you, Chair. I appreciated Mr. Nader's submission on behalf of the Conservative Party that makes mention of the fact these are extra costs borne to the taxpayer. Considering the fact that these, you may have already invited them for next week, you've already spent the money. If that's what you're saying, you've already spent taxpayer money without notifying us on this before the vote, and you've already spent that money on behalf of taxpayers without notifying us, then it may as well be the fact that we have this meeting called, but I would suggest we still have an opportunity to save Canadian taxpayers thousands of dollars by actually doing this meeting at a regularly scheduled time. Mr. Chair, I trust you, and I know you're really good at this work. I know you're a fantastic chair. You have all my confidence to make certain and use the most appropriate your ability as our chair on behalf of all of us to use the resources that you have to make certain that any of the days that we have no scheduled witnesses, if I could read them if you'd like, the 21st, which is the Tuesday after Thursday, the 28th, which is the next Tuesday, the 4th of June is empty, the 11th of June is empty, the 18th of June is empty, the 13th
Point of order.
of June, the 20th June. Oh, sorry.
Point of order.
Is that too many regularly scheduled?
Yeah, I'm going to hear the point of order
regularly
first,
scheduled
Mr. Desjardins. Mr. Stewart, you have a point of order?
I just hope it's relevant, Mr. Chair.
So do I.
I'm sure it is. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this is extremely relevant. We have an unruly, uncooperative, disruptive, potentially very guilty public safety witness who has declined their invitation to be here today. And the fact that we're having a conversation of kicking it a month down the road is quite substantial to the members.
4 days isn't a month.
Topic of
Mr.
debate.
Stewart.
So, Mr. Desjardins, you have the floor.
Thank you. I would suggest that 4 days isn't a month. I could bring out a calendar for Mr. Stewart to count the days. I can count them for him, the difference between what is on a Thursday next week to what is on a Tuesday the following week. Mr. Stewart, do the math. You're someone I know that's very, very incredible member of our parliament, and you're very honorable. And I know that we've worked together on holding the government accountable when it comes to the barn study, for example, the fiasco that is the extreme issue with expenditure on taxpayer dollars for the barn. I hope you can see the same relevance here, Mr. Stewart, that your constituents, and I'll speak directly to your constituents, I think don't expect you to, on one hand, hold the government accountable for expenditures that are inappropriate, and then at the same time ask the same taxpayer to pay a bunch of money when you could have had that same work done 4 days later. Come on, guys. You know what game you're playing. Let's vote on this and just get this over with, because I agree with my Bloc colleague that she's raised a very incredibly important point. And I think we have to be able to balance resource with what's actually needed on behalf of Canadians. And I'd suggest that, Chair, we even strike the date altogether and give you the power, Chair, because I trust you and you're a great chair, to find the date of any of the numbers I've mentioned that's most appropriate.
Thank you. Yes, Ms. Khalid.
Thank you very much, Chair. And given that there were obviously an uneven distribution of knowledge in this committee, where clearly Conservative members had access to information before any other members had access to information on this, and came prepared with a motion, came prepared with a meeting already scheduled, I would really agree with Mr. Desjardins on this, to amend the motion as it is, to strike the date from it and to replace it with on any sitting week before the end of this session.
It is, of course, your right to do that. Yes.
As I'm speaking on this, it is also possible, like if you've invited somebody for the Thursday of a Constit week, you are able to move that witness to any of the other open slots that we have from now until the end of June also. I don't think that we need to go through all of that trouble. And as Mr. Desjardins outlined, to go through that just for 4 days, it really doesn't make sense to me. And I'm hearing from my colleagues as well that it is quite perplexing as to why we're doing this. So I would move that amendment to strike out the date and to replace it with any sitting date from now until the end of this session.
So let me just delicately comment, because both you and Mr. Desjardins mentioned it. I think you're overstating the days that are open. June 4th, there is in fact an Auditor General will be tabling 3 reports, which is why I've been both working to try to get reports done line by line and to free space in June for those 3 audit reports. This is where the committee both kind of pulls and pushes at the same time, wanting kind of maximum meetings on studies is what we have to catch up line by line, but also rejecting recess sittings and now potentially turning what I viewed as 1 meeting into 2, which is the committee's right to do. So I will say this. If this motion passes, it will certainly, I'll find space for it, but it will be at the expense of one of the meetings that are currently scheduled. And we'll still be here Thursday next week. So this to me, this is well within the committee's right to decide and to dictate to the chair. I do find it unnecessary because it means having not 1 meeting with individuals, but 2. So on that note, it is your choice how we proceed. But your amendment is to strike the date altogether and to have these 2 members not sit in a recess week.
Chair, I will again reiterate, I think you have the discretion, just as you had the discretion to try to schedule this meeting during a Constit week, that you can also move the 1 witness that you have appearing for the 2 hours to come during a sitting week as well, to save the taxpayers their dollars, to save all of us the 4 days that you're trying to. I'm really not sure what the objective is here, Chair, because I am looking at the calendar, I am looking at the work plan, and I see that it is manageable, it is doable. So I would appreciate, although we are talking specifically about what Mr. Nader has proposed, if you do have something scheduled already and we're learning about it kind of at the last minute, I would encourage you to move that into a sitting week as well, so that you don't have to do the 2 meetings, Chair. You have the ability, you have the flexibility to do that. We are here to work with you on it. You called a special meeting during a sitting week anyway this week. Why can't you do that for the 5 upcoming sitting weeks that we have? It would be, I think, a lot more convenient and a lot more efficient for not just members in this House, but also for the witness that is appearing, and also for the House administration that are putting in all of this extra work, so that we can do the work that we do in public accounts.
Thank you. So just, I'm not sure. Did you? So the amendment is to strike the date and for these two to sit in a sitting week. Okay. Is that clear, Clerk? Just 1 second. So I'm going to have to suspend for a few minutes because we're looking for some procedural guidance here. Typically, amendments or motions have specific dates, or summons have specific dates or buys. So I, of course, want to be guided by the best parliamentary practices we have, and our clerk is looking for an answer for this right away. So I'm going to suspend for a few minutes. Please don't go too far, because I will call the meeting back in order once we have an answer. This meeting is suspended. to take their seats again. In consultation with the clerk, I'm going to move your amendment out of order, Ms. Khalid. The reason being, committee exercises its powers by adopting a motion to summon one or more individuals to appear before it at a set date and time. And what you propose does not do that. I'll recognize Mr. Desjardins. So we're back to debating the motion as amended by you, sir. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. In consideration of the schedule, looking at the 21st where we have spring cleaning, which I know is probably not nearly as important as the work of ArriveCan, I suggest that we actually move that meeting to the 4 days from the date to which Mr. Nader moved to summon them on a non-sitting week. That would cost taxpayers thousands of dollars to ship Conservatives back to Ottawa at the taxpayers' expense. Instead of doing that, I suggest that the regularly scheduled meeting we have, where we'll all be sitting, will be Tuesday, May 21st. It's a reasonable date. It saves the taxpayer thousands of dollars that they don't have to send Conservatives to sit in Ottawa for the 2 hours for. And we get what we need to ensure that we have accountability to what is an extremely serious situation between consecutive Liberal and Conservative governments that have spent nearly $1 billion in outsourcing. So I think it's reasonable to suggest, Mr. Chair, that the 4 days past the date to which Mr. Nader's made recommendation is soon enough to actually have the level of work that we need to be done, and it's a free day. And so I'm happy to do that in cooperation with my honourable colleagues.
I can assure you the analysts do not view that as a free date because, as you know, we spend time following up on departments. Having said that, we can move anything the committee decides. I see Mr. Nader, and after that, Ms. Khalid. Mr. Nader, you have the floor, please.
You, Chair. I guess then we'll have two ArriveCan meetings. We'll have a meeting next Thursday with the witnesses that are already confirmed for that day, and we'll have another ArriveCan meeting on the following Tuesday on
Sorry, point of order, Chair? Did Mr. Nader just confirm that there's a meeting that you've already declared before this motion's even passed?
Mr. Desjardins, at the top of the meeting, to bring things into focus, I said I'm working with the clerk right now to have a meeting next Thursday. Regardless of how this motion, whether it's approved or rejected, there is going to be a meeting next Thursday at 10 a.m. Happening. So if the committee decides to break it up, I'm trying to be efficient here with witnesses as possible to have a.
So you've already spent the money. Is that what you're saying? I'm curious about the money.
Sure.
Who's spending the money? Who spent the money? Did you spend the money? And if you spent the money already, because
right.
Mr. Nader.
Anyway, you had a point of clarification. I'll come back to you, Mr. Nader. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, obviously, as you mentioned at the top, you had scheduled a meeting for next Thursday with the witness that you've already confirmed. This was going to be more efficient to have these two called for that date. I think that's the most efficient option. I jump in my little Hyundai Elantra and get here. I don't fly across the country. That's the option. It's also the Zoom option for those who would rather do that. I think this is about accountability. Taxpayers expect us to do the work 365 days of the year often, and whether that happens when the House of Commons is in session. Again, go back to the fact that additional resources, whether it's interpreters or house staff, are available more easily on weeks when the House of Commons is not sitting. We've seen meetings canceled on a number of occasions when the House is sitting because of the extreme demand on staff. So. I think it makes sense to do it if there's going to be a meeting anyway. Make sure we get it all done at once. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Khalid, you have the floor again.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate that. I just wanted to confirm something. I know that you are going to get back to Mr. Desjardins, but you said that there's been no witness confirmed. You're going to have the meeting on this Constit week regardless. And you're saying that there's no witness confirmed. Mr. Nader is saying that there is a witness confirmed, and he was trying to be more efficient by calling in this motion to schedule in meetings when the rest of the committee members, other than the Conservatives, did not know anything about this. at all, right? So I just want to clarify that that is exactly what I have heard. That is what committee members are trying to get to you. And I want to add to that, Chair. This agenda for today's meeting has had so many changes. In fact, the last minute changes is unreal. I mean, the original notice of meeting for today's meeting actually had witnesses on it. And now we went to committee business, then we went to draft reports, and now we're in a public committee business setting. The draft reports that we were supposed to review today are dated February, and we received them yesterday. And these are pages, there's over 50 pages of here that, members have reviewed over the past evening, right? So I'm just really perplexed here as to what exactly is going on. Do you have a witness for Thursday? Do you not? Are you just trying to have a meeting for the sake of having a meeting? And that calls into question what Mr. Desjardins is saying. Are you just spending taxpayer dollars for just the sake of it? And why can't we be more efficient in how we're scheduling these meetings and how we keep moving things around to quite honestly, the way that it seems like with the 15 Arrive-Can meetings and all of these others that we've had, 7 during Constit weeks, I'm trying to understand, as a chair, I thought that we're in a public accounts committee. We're trying to do the nonpartisan thing and really make sure that we are being fiscally responsible in how the government spends money, working with the Auditor General, working with all members of this committee. So what exactly is happening, and why is it, Chair, that certain members of the committee have information before other members of the committee? Why are we waiting constantly? Why are we continuing to, at the very, very last minute, have to change our plans as to how things are going to progress? And I'm not sure if it's at your whim or the whim of your whip or what's happening here, but I really would prefer some clarification here, Chair.
I will let the clerk address the timing of the reports. It would surprise me if you received documents only yesterday. I will let the clerk, if she's able, just touch on the witnesses that were previously in this slot. I will just remind everyone that at the very top, I said there would be a meeting Thursday. I have secured a understanding with a witness that was approved by this committee. I do not have the paper for that yet, so I'm not in a position to announce it, as the clerk has previously. Just like these calendars are all confidential. Because we're adults, because we can talk about things that we can keep confidential. But I said that right off the top. So Mr. Nader is just repeating what I said. So that's where that came from. I said it right off the top to help focus attention. So, Mr. Desjardins, you have the floor. Oh, no, sorry. I was going to give the clerk a chance to speak. Pardon me.
Oh,
Madam
sorry,
Clerk.
Chair.
Yes, pardon me.
So in regards to the notice of meeting, it was originally published on Tuesday at 5:59 p.m. with the 3 draft reports on it. Any indication for witnesses would have originally been on a draft calendar that was shared to the committee. In regards to reports 7 and 8, they were only distributed yesterday. That was an oversight on my end. Because of the reports, we wanted to make sure that we were studying them soon before distributing them to ensure that members had them readily available. Of course, this was an oversight on my end, and for that I apologize. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Desjardins, you have the floor.
Thank you, Clerk, for that. I really do appreciate your apology, and it's a level of accountability that I think we can all learn from in this committee when being accountable to our actions. And I particularly think, Mr. Chair, that you've already done the action of spending taxpayer dollars. You've already asked us to come to committee during a non-sitting week. And it's a conservative control committee. I understand this is a conservative control committee. They get to spend how much money you want. And so I feel I'm outnumbered and outgunned here. And so for those reasons, I guess I'll have to submit as well as taxpayers to the Conservatives' demand to continuously spend their money. I don't see the logic in it, trying to investigate $60 million and spending $60 million to do it. Doesn't make sense to me, doesn't make sense to Canadians. But I'm happy to have the meeting since it sounds like, Mr. Chair, if you can't confirm, you've already spent the money. The money's been spent for next week. We got to have that meeting no matter what. So I'd say let's just call a vote. But I really do think my amendment to the motion is a good one, and it should have us reflect on the kinds of ways we're spending taxpayer dollars, particularly in this Conservative Control Committee. So I'm happy with going forward, Chair, with next week. You've already spent the money. Let's do the meeting, but let's really be serious about this going forward. Let's be serious about how much it costs to have these meetings for taxpayers.
Thank you. Suivant.
Premièrement, je suis la dernière en liste.
First of all, am I the last on the list? Well, that can change. I'll be quick because we have 45 minutes left and we're trying to focus on what the nub of what we're looking for is. It's accountability, it's shedding light on what's happening. So I would say, as other colleagues have said, think about the taxpayers who are watching. They might not be that numerous, but they're there. I think we're ready for a vote, and we can try to drop some of the partisanship that's seizing the opportunity to make partisan points. We can be constructive, and we can look at these reports that have been around since February. I hope we can move forward.
Clerk, could you call the roll call, please? Oh, pardon, Madame Shanahan.
Madame.
I even did a second look, didn't see anyone. Ms. Shanahan, over to you.
Clarification là, pour, parce que
A clarification. I think the way in which information is shared is quite a serious matter. The clerk may be able to confirm at what time we received, at what time the PDF was created, the PDF with Mr. Nader's motion today. It seems to be around 2:33 p.m. And some members did seem to have information before the meeting had begun.
PDF that you received?
so the PDF of the motion was created apparently just prior to the meeting at 2:33, which means that Mr. Nader had the information about Mr. Girard prior to you speaking to us about it at 3:30.
Mr. Nader, go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. We created that PDF or that notice of motion prior to question period today because we had no confirmation that Mr. Girard had agreed to attend this committee, and we also had a clarification that Mr. Ozowski was declining our. So we created a motion to summon the two witnesses. Simple as that.
You had that prior to the other committee members.
Chair, as Ms. Shanahan would know, we received an email from our clerk saying that Mr. Ozowski had declined, and we had not received any notification from Mr. Girard, which is why we had the impetus to write this motion. And that is why I submitted the motion, which is before you. It's as simple as that.
Oh, my goodness. I think it is clear.
Thank you. Could you call the question, clerk? No, Blake's amendment passed. This is the actual motion as, why don't I read it? Je vais lire. Pardon. Okay. Attends une seconde. I'll have the clerk read it, s'il vous plaît. Yes, you're...
So the motion, as amended, reads as follows. That John Ozowski and Paul Girard be summoned to appear before the committee on Thursday, May 16th, 2024, in relation to the study on Report 1, ArriveCan, of the 2024 reports of the Auditor General of Canada, and that members be provided an estimate of the cost of this meeting.
Very good. Allez-y, s'il vous plaît.
Shall the motion of Mr. Nader, as amended, be adopted? Ms. Bradford?
Yes.
Ms. Khalid?
Yes.
Ms. Shanahan. Mr. Sorbera.
Yes.
Ms. Yip.
Yes.
Mr. Nader.
Yes.
Mr. Stewart.
Yes.
Mr. Schmale. Madame Gaudreau. Monsieur Desjardins.
Yes.
10 yeas.
That is passed. I'm going to just raise the next point. I'll look for comments, and if I don't receive it, I will, of course, move us into camera. As previously mentioned, Minister Haiju has declined to appear to discuss Report 3, Housing in First Nations Communities. Just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention. And I see Mr. Desjardins has his hand up, so I'll turn things over to you, Mr. Desjardins.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank all members of our committee for your support in this motion. It was meaningful for me and meaningful to First Nations across our country to see support and unanimous support across party lines, to see the minister invited to be accountable for what is a very serious and sad and deplorable state that's facing my relatives and First Nations across the country. It's been no secret. Auditor General after Auditor General after Auditor General has said this is beyond unacceptable. We know that there are still boil water advisories. We know from the Auditor General herself that nothing is being done to address more seriously the issue of who is accountable for these immense failures. Absent of the courts, this has been something that our political entities for decades and decades have not contributed fair value towards. Mr. Chair, I seek your advice in this regard. I understand that a minister may not appear to be held accountable on this committee. It breaks my heart, and I think it certainly will for the First Nations I've spoken to, including that of Treaty 6, who was hoping to hear from the minister themselves as to why she wasn't going to be present and how she was going to implement an action plan to see the very serious issues presented in the Auditor General's report taken seriously. And so I believe we cannot summon a minister. We can only invite them. I'm troubled by this because we've now issued an invitation. And so is there any other mechanism, Chair, that you are aware of to which we can summon a minister or even a deputy minister, I suppose, or someone to be held accountable that represents the government or Indigenous Services Canada to actually come to speak to us and our representatives that we've invited, like the Grand Chief from Treaty 6, to be held accountable for the conditions in his communities?
Mr. Desjardins, I have a few thoughts on it that I've raised with the clerk, but I'd like to hear a few more comments from the floor, if you don't mind. I see Mr. Schmale would like to address us. So Mr. Schmale, and I'm looking for others as well. So you have the floor, sir, Mr. Schmale.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate this opportunity to speak on this, and I am quite happy that the NDP now is seeing that there needs to be respect for taxpayer dollars. And our previous conversation enlightens me the fact that they
order,
do
Chair?
care about
I
that.
thought we were talking about First Nations housing, and
that was my first comment.
Former motion.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Desjardins. That's I often allow all members a little drive-by, and all members take them. So, Mr. Schmale, you have the floor, please. He's getting to his main point. I can tell, Mr. Desjardins.
Thank you. And just a half second later, I was going to say I support Mr. Desjardins' concern and absolute shock that the Minister of Indigenous Services has refused to come to this committee and speak about the horrible conditions that Indigenous communities face on community for housing. I should also point out, as the Vice Chair for the Indigenous and Northern Affairs Committee, Minister Haiju has actually declined our invitations to attend. In fact, there were multiple invites to that minister. She was even invited to come to the committee to talk about the supplemental estimate Bs. She has yet to come to that committee to talk about the sup Bs, and you know how long ago that was. I believe we now have her coming in the Thursday after the break week to talk about the estimates. Even that's cutting it close. So I think that department, although it continues to get extraordinarily large in terms of the people that are going into that department, but yet we are seeing the results go down, the outcomes go down. And that has been proven by the Auditor General, the Parliamentary Budget Officer, and many others. And now we are seeing issues with ongoing issues that have not got better with Jordan's Principle, with non-insured health benefits, housing, drinking water, et cetera, et cetera. And the fact that this minister refuses to actually show up to either committees, one of which, looking after Indigenous and Northern Affairs, is absolutely shameful. It has been pointed out to me and potentially an issue for this committee to deal with, and perhaps we will get to it at the INAN committee as well, is the fact that we can actually ask the House to compel the minister to come to this committee and answer these very important questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Smale. I see no one else with a hand up except for Mr. Dizzy. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate Mr. Schmiel's comments, and I find him to be a very honorable member as well. We've worked together on these issues many times, and the last portion of what he mentioned about was that a proposal for a tool that we would be able to have? Sorry, maybe I can get clarification. If we can we actually summon a minister? Because if so, I would love to summon her. Let's summon her right now.
So, Mr. Nader, why don't you're the in-house expert here, and since this is a political matter, I will refer to you before we come back to the clerk and the House administration, but you have the floor, please.
Sure, and I mean, our clerk would certainly correct my terminology if I get anything wrong, but I believe that we as a committee could table a report in the House, which would ask the House to compel the attendance, and compel might be the wrong word, but to require the attendance of the minister at this committee. So that would be one possibility, and I think, I don't want to speak for my colleagues, but I think that's something we'd obviously be supportive of. I mean, for a minister to decline to be held accountable to committees, I think that's unfortunate.
That's something to consider. Madame Gaudreau, avez-vous des commentaires? Oui, and Mr. Desjardins.
Ms. Gaudreau, do you have any comments? I'll come back to you, Mr. Desjardins. I want to talk about my experiences at PROC and ethics. Committees are masters of their own fate. They make choices. As long as members vote and approve it, they can require witnesses to come and be accountable. At PROC, we had a lot of ministers appearing, and here, public accounts. It's very important to shed light on a given situation like the one we're talking about, particularly since it is in the Auditor General's report. So, Mr. Chairman, if the committee votes to approve the minister's appearance, that would be a very legitimate request. That's it. I've concluded.
Mr. Desjardins, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I really do appreciate Ms. Gaudreau and Mr. Nader and Mr. Schmiel's comments today in support of options to look at this. Listen, I'm fully cooperative in our approach to find an option for this, how we actually get the minister to be accountable to this audit. And maybe I'd actually invite Mr. Chair, a member of the Liberal Party, maybe it's as easy as her own members speaking to her about the importance of this. I understand there could be a loss of communication. There could be, an issue of maybe she doesn't understand the urgency quite yet of the fact that their Auditor General has now had many reports. But we need to explore all tools. If we are truly masters of our committee, and I think Ms. Gaudreau is right, we should be able to at least compel her in some way, shape, or form, unless there's advice from you, Chair, that we can't. But to Mr. Nader's point, I really want to explore that. And I think, Mr. Nader, with your support and with Mr. Schmiel's support, we could look at options in the House of Commons to do something like that. Of course, we would stand in full support of that kind of recommendation to the House that could compel our committee to summon her.
Why don't I'm going to just read out the sections. It will help focus attention, and then I'll turn to Mr. Smale, who I believe wanted to address us. And quote, this is on page 892 in English. If a member of the House of Commons refuses an invitation to appear before a standing committee, and the committee decides that such an appearance is necessary, it may so report to the House, and it'll be up to the House to decide what measures should be taken. So that is the path that the committee has to not compel the witness, but begin the process to have the House of Commons decide what steps will be taken. Mr. Smale, please.
Just want to build on this conversation as well, more for our counterparts around the table that may just be new to this developing situation. And I bring to the attention of Mr. Desjardins, if he remembers back during the discussions of C-53, the Métis Self-Governing Act that we were discussing just before Christmas and into January, the agreement at that time was for the SUP-Bs, this is months ago now, that if we got C-53 through committee, at that point, the ministers would gladly appear to answer questions of the committee. We have no ministers to date. We are told just a few weeks ago that we're still waiting on a date that works in their schedules. So just painting the picture for everybody in this room that if we take it to the next step where we have to have a vote on a particular motion, this is an ongoing problem, not just here, but at INAN, in a department that is swelling with bureaucracy, but yet the results are going down the drain. And these are Indigenous lives at stake here. Housing is horrible conditions, drinking water, again, ongoing challenges, people not having drinking water that's safe, Jordan's principle, endless concerns about that. So I could go on and on, but like my friend from the block said, let's if there's a path forward to have a motion, let's get to a vote. But I wanted to inform the committee, those that might not be aware of what's going on at the INAN committee, that there are serious issues with getting Minister Hajdu to appear.
Thank you. Ms. Bradford, you have the floor, please. And I just noticed Mr. Desjardins, but I saw Mr. Bradford first, so please.
Mr. Chair, can you share with us the reason that the minister gave to you that she couldn't come to our committee?
I will. Yes, I will. It was the clerk who sent it to me, and the clerk is occupied, so I'm going to try to find it. She. I'll look as well. Oh, clerk will read it.
The ISC minister will be appearing at INAN on June 3rd on the subject of the OAG report on Indigenous housing. As such, Minister Hajdu's office has indicated that she is declining this invitation to appear at PAC on the same topic.
Understand it then, she is appearing at INAN at the same time that we were wanting her to appear here.
No, Mr. Schmel, I'll hear from you after, so yes.
She's appearing at INAN at the exact time, so she can't be here. Like, there's a valid reason, clearly, that she can't be two places at once.
But we didn't give her a date. We asked for a date.
Okay, so it would seem that there, as often happens with committees, there's duplication where we ask the same witnesses to appear at multiple committees on the same topic, which again, if we're talking about using and misusing resources effectively, here would seem to be another example. If she's being asked to appear on the same topic at more than one committee, and in this case, yes, it does seem to be a conflict of time as well.
Mr. Desjardins, it seems that you and I are now being balled together, misusing resources, but you have the floor, and then I'll see Mr. Schmale.
No, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I do see the potential irony in that, but I'm not calling for an extra meeting. you might see. I'm calling for the regular resources for the minister to attend. And 2 points, Ms. Bradford, to your point, yes, INAN, they're going to INAN, as they should go to INAN. It's the Committee for Indigenous and Northern Affairs Canada, but this is the Auditor General's committee. She tabled a report on here. You are responsible, Ms. Bradford, for investigating and properly investigating the outcome of the Auditor General's reports. That's the mandate of this committee. Unless I've mistakenly heard you, I don't think you intended to imply that we should ignore the Auditor General's report and ignore our mandate in this committee to actually pursue the core objective and mandate of this committee. Or it can be seen or perceived by your comments that you wish to ignore this very real and legitimate concern on behalf of First Nations or the mandate of this committee. Which is it?
Am I allowed to respond?
I can put you on the list, but I had Mr. Smale first. So Mr. Smale and Mr. Deja, I'm just going to ask you to put your hand down, and you're welcome to put it back up. But I just want you to go. Thank you, Mr. Smale, and then I have a little list here, but you're back on it, Ms. Bradford. Go ahead, Mr.
Okay,
Smale.
thank you, Chair. I don't have my notes in front of me. I'm just looking through my binder, but I do believe that when the minister is appearing on the 22nd, it is for the estimates, but I'm looking for confirmation on that.
Thank you. Mr. Stewart?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I remember, just if I could add something to the seriousness of the issue to Mr. Desilets' comment. As former Minister of Aboriginal Affairs in New Brunswick, I had, as you can imagine, I had, 16 altogether First Nations, but I also had 4 in my current constituency. And I remember I remember one community in particular. The chief called me and asked me if I could drive down and see something in his community. When I got there, I got into the truck with the chief, who's about my own age, and he had this picture in his truck, and it was a picture of him at about age 10 or 11 with 4 other friends, all the same age. They were all deceased, except for him at this point in time, many to suicide. And we had a pretty heartfelt conversation about the community and, some of the struggles. Obviously, Jordan's principle was always topical. But in terms of the housing issues in that particular community, and this is why the minister of any of these departments related to Indigenous affairs, this is why they should always agree to whatever invitation they're getting. I went to a house and there was mold everywhere. There was mold all over the house, and I have asthma, so as soon as I walked into that, I started breathing terribly because I have chronic asthma, and you could visibly see it was black mold and it was everywhere. What was more interesting is in that household, it would have been suitable for a family of, maybe 4 people, maybe 5 max, and there was probably 16 or 17 people living in that house that I was aware of, as per the chief. And there were programs, federal programs, they were trying to achieve to fix the mold problem. The band council couldn't afford it. Their money was stretched to other programs and projects, and there was this huge pot of money in the federal government. I forget the exact name of the program, but they couldn't achieve it. And the people in the house didn't have the sort of the know-how to get rid of all this mold, and they had nowhere else to go because the community was already down probably 400 units. This was a big community in the Mi'kmaq territory of New Brunswick. So I just wanted to say that at those times, what I observed, it really changes everything for me, and I think the minister should simply just agree to whatever invitation we're inviting them to, because it's so important, and I just wanted to share that. Thank you.
Thank you. On that files are always welcome. Ms. Bradford, you'd asked for a turn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just to clarify the thread, I'm responding to Mr. Desjardins. So the reason I raised the question with the chair was I was wanting him to share with the members of this committee what reason, if any, the minister gave that she was unavailable. So that's why I raised the question. I believe that, typically what we normally would do is that the process of this committee would be to review the report and bring the AG with department officials in, as this committee has historically done. And we usually deal with deputy ministers as well, not ministers. So, and even our chair has mentioned that it is irregular for us to ask ministers to appear, that normally it is the deputy minister that appears before the Public Accounts Committee.
Thank you. Mr. Desjardins, you have the floor again.
No, Ms. Bradford, I do appreciate that, and I hope you can appreciate the severity of the Auditor General's call to do more. And she demanded that we have a level of accountability that is beyond the regular statutes of this committee. And although I appreciate the comment of the regular processes that we would take under an audit, like in having the Deputy Minister of Transport talk to us about, some rail ties that were incomplete in the last fiscal year, I want to press upon you the urgency. If I haven't already, and if the Auditor Generals over the last 20 years haven't already, I hope you can understand the severity. Mr. Stewart just submitted a very legitimate and a very sad reality of what the state of First Nations housing is. This is an emergency. It's life or death. That's what we're talking about. He has asthma. Imagine an Indigenous child with asthma right now in that house with all that mold. I don't know about you, but I have many people in my life that I would not want to see living in a deplorable state like that. This is the worst instance of our country. I've spoken many times of how I'm firmly a believer that the lack of action in this work amounts to a genocide. If we do not do something, Ms. Bradford, I'm begging you to see with clarity and with humanity how important this work is. And it's unfortunate that the minister hasn't appeared. The deputy minister herself has spoken about the fact that she as well has her hands tied. We need a level of accountability. It's been decades and decades of sitting on hands. The Auditor Generals, for the last 3 Auditor Generals, have said this is beyond unacceptable. Can we please have the unanimous support to see a motion that would actually ensure that this work could get done? And so I would move that
Just
the
Mr.
standing committee.
I'm just going to pause you because you have sent me a note asking for information. I have asked the clerk to send all members the information. What you have is a draft of a previous one. You will need to work on it with better language. That is just a template for you to work with, as you can see. But Ms. Bradford would like the floor, so I can give you a few minutes. And if you're still working on it and there's no speakers, I will suspend because I see your intent. But Ms. Bradford, you have the floor, please.
To Mr. Desjardins, I would just like to confirm that, I really don't want you making this personal as though I'm uncaring. I was merely raising a question. Why did the minister say she was unavailable? And I think that was a fair thing to do. Of course I care. I don't think there's a person on this committee that is not alarmed and not aware of the severity of the situation as indicated in the AG's report. That's not what's in question here. So I just wanted to clarify that I feel it's unfair that you construe that, I or anyone else on this committee, I think, does not take this situation very seriously. Of course it is.
Thank you. I'm not seeing more speakers, but I get a drift. Mr. What I was going to do, I was going to suspend for just a few minutes, Mr. because you're right in the middle of this debate. I think you need a few minutes to craft your language. So I'll suspend for 3 to 5 minutes. 5 minutes, I see.
Sorry, Chair. Can I just make a last comment?
Of course, yes.
Just in response to Ms.
Yes, but you will. When I unsuspend, you will get the first turn. So.
Yes. No, I just want to be able to make certain that Ms. Bradford understands that this is not intended to be personal, and I apologize if you feel that you've been of personal offense to this work. I hope you can understand the balance of temperament I must have, as it's a severe issue for me personally, and it's very difficult to imagine a scenario where this level of accountability could be sidetracked. And so for the purposes of your offense, I apologize, but for the purposes of summoning the minister, I believe we can get support.
Very good. That's very good of you, Mr. Desjardins. I will suspend for 3 to 5 minutes and so don't go far from this room again. This meeting is suspended. to order. À l'ordre, s'il vous plaît. Mr. Desjardins, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I've spoken many times to the immense urgency that Indigenous housing presents to communities across our country. It's clear that the federal government, through subsequent audits stemming back as far as 30 years ago, with the commitments that were made by governments, in addition to the fact that the Auditor General has confirmed that many of those results haven't hit their targets, and that Indigenous people continue to suffer deplorable living conditions, that it amounts to an emergency. Because of those reasons, Mr. Chair, I'd like to move a motion that the Standing Committee on Public Accounts report to the House that the member for Thunder Bay Superior North has refused to testify before the committee on matters relating to Report 2, Housing in First Nations Communities, and of the 2024 reports 2 to 4 of the Auditor General of Canada, and that the committee recommends that the House order the member for Thunder Bay Superior North to appear before the committee on a date and time to be determined by this committee.
So moved. I have a speaking list, Mr. Desjardins, so I'm going to turn to that.
C'est difficile quand les interprètes n'ont pas la motion.
Oh, okay.
Hein? Je les félicite parce que ça va faire 2 heures, mais
It's difficult when interpreters don't have the motion. It's great to print it out and give it to them. Very helpful.
Oh, and je vais demander notre greffier de lire la motion.
I will ask them to read the motion again.
As well. Mr. Desjardins, why don't you put your hand down, and you can put it back up right away if you like, but thank you. That's just helpful, just so it resets my brain. And the clerk is going to read the motion in French as well.
La motion, c'est
That the Standing Committee on Public Accounts report to the House that the member for Thunder Bay Superior North has refused to testify before the Committee on Matters relating to Report 2, Housing in First Nations Communities, of the 2024 reports 2 to 4 of the Auditor General of Canada, and that the committee recommends that the House order the member for Thunder Bay Superior North to appear before the committee on a date and time to be determined by this committee. There.
Yes, I have Ms. Yip to begin with.
Thank you, Chair. The letter that was sent, I just feel that there is a process and a progression that I feel that we should take before we go to what the motion has suggested. And I would like to propose that we send another letter before going straight to the House to ask another time to the minister to come to make sure that there isn't, to make it very clear what the intent is, and to perhaps look at the schedule a little bit more closely. And I think that to go from A to C is perhaps a little bit, it could be done in a way that we could be more perhaps just giving another chance for the minister to consider our request.
Thank you. Ms. Shanahan, you had expressed an interest to speak. You have the floor, please.
Yes, Chair. I think you recall that when this request came up a few meetings ago, I spoke to the fact that that this is a committee, Public Accounts, doing the work of reviewing the Auditor General reports, which typically has a deputy, more than typically, it was actually a former NDP member, David Christopherson, who fought for the imperative that this committee see deputy ministers, because he saw at the time and was quite emphatic when many of us new members in 2015 joined the public accounts, that it's the accountability in the delivery mechanism, because I think that is, and I share the concerns of Mr. Desjardins in the sense that that this has been treated, this topic in various ways and forms has been treated by the Auditor General's office, and it feels like that the results are not being felt on the ground, and that is, I think, after successive changes in policy and direction, certainly a massive influx of investment into Indigenous affairs, never before seen in the history of our government, and that as this committee has been able to determine on through questions and testimony from department officials, it very often has to do with gaps in data collection, inability to work collaboratively with Indigenous communities, a kind of colonial, historical, blindness and deafness to to what is going on the ground, or in other cases where there were good intentions and a desire to move quickly to fix problems like boil water advisories. But if I think of some of the policies of previous governments to simply go in and build a water treatment plant, invest money, but then not ensuring that that there was capacity in the community to maintain and keep that water treatment plant going. Things that if there had been more consultation, more serious consultation, more attention, more informed delivery by the people in our public service who we have entrusted these policies and programs to execute, that indeed it didn't happen until I think that there was a sea change in the approach, and we actually see in the matter of boil water advisories a significant improvement. And I think that is a testament to our public servants that who deeply care.
Point of order.
About this issue.
I have a point of order. Yes.
Can Ms. Shanahan confirm that she's filibustering?
That's not a point of order, Ms. Shanahan.
Well,
you have
the minister.
you have
we're
the
either
floor.
inviting her to come
order,
or not.
order.
Right?
Ms. Shanahan has the floor.
Well, thank you very much, Chair.
Point of order.
And
I'm sorry, Ms. Shanahan. I'm hearing another point of order. I think that was from Mr. Desjardins.
It's a point of order on relevance, Mr. Chair. And just if I can comment quickly, if the Liberals are going to filibuster,
No, okay.
I have no more energy for
No,
this.
Mr. I see your hand, Mr.
But if
Desjardins.
that's the way we're going, we might as well just adjourn.
Mr. Desjardins, I see your hand, and I appreciate your thoughts. Ms. Shanahan has the floor, and she's well within her rights on these topics. In point d'ordre, Madame. C'est une point d'ordre? Oui.
Point of order. Does the committee have a certain duration of time? We don't have much time, but we do have some time. It's like a soccer match. We go into overtime, and the meeting will go on until I say we're out of time. For now, there is time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And indeed, what I'm speaking to is the functioning of this committee and how it is that this committee addresses the review and analysis and the work of parliamentarians in trying to improve the work of the government in all the different areas that the government is called upon to yes, apply policies that would come from the government of the day, from the executive, but indeed have to be undertaken, operationalized, measured, resourced, budgeted for, and then undertaken by public servants. And that is why Mr. Christopherson was so adamant. And in fact, he said, and I don't want to see ministers here. And I think if I had more time, I would look up the quotes. He said, I don't want to see ministers here. I want to see, because they can appear in other committees where they're going to talk about policies and so on. He says, there are other avenues. But the people that I want to see in public accounts are the officials who are ultimately responsible.
I am going to press relevance a little bit. I appreciate what a previous member said who is no longer in the Parliament, no longer chair of this committee. I will remind the member that this is a witness that this committee agreed should be on the witness list. And I believe it was passed unanimously by this committee. So I'm going to turn things back over to you, Ms. Shanahan, but I'm going to point out relevance if you go back to a member who's no longer on this committee, when this committee decided unanimously to call in the minister.
Indeed. And, Chair, I'm just recalling back to what I said at the time, and why, having the minister appear, who we have had appear here before, is, yes, I guess some members do feel that it's a joke. I'm sorry to see that.
Order. Ms. Shannon, you have the floor. Please, look, yes. Please, everyone, maintain your respect. If you need to stretch your legs, I'd ask you to go outside. Ms. Shanahan, you have the floor.
Well, thank you, Chair. And why am I going into this kind of depth on this issue is because, as my colleague pointed out, we're going from a letter of invitation to like DEFCON 10 on where we're going on this. So I think that there is certainly, as we have done with other witnesses here, there's certainly room for the committee to reiterate the request, to write another letter, to look for, and Chair, you have said this yourself, there's a reason why we normally we cannot compel ministers to come here because they have, of course, very busy schedules, and we try as much as possible, which I believe the clerk could confirm, to work with the ministers' schedules. And so maybe it is just simply a matter of that. letter from the minister indicated that she was appearing before INAN, where she should rightfully so appear, on this very same topic on June 3rd. And I can't speak for the minister, but I could see where she felt that was answering the calls. So I could go on further, Chair, but I think in the interest of coming to ground on something here, I would propose the following amendment. Now, do we have, Chair, do we have the wording of the motion? Can the clerk read that out for us?
Let me check with the clerk. I believe it was sent. Ça a été envoyé.
Okay, because I just want to see
Is that right, clerk?
where the...
Oh, okay.
No?
On va l'envoyer tout de suite, pardon.
Okay, right.
We'll send it right away. We get all kinds of emails before the meeting or during.
What? Okay. Okay.
Mr. Desjardins, we're just waiting for the your motion to be distributed, and then Ms. Shanahan has an amendment to your motion.
Okay.
Ms. Shanahan, would you be able to read your amendment?
I move the following amendment, that the committee request the Minister of Indigenous Service Canada appear before the Standing Committee of Public Accounts regarding the Auditor General's report on Indigenous housing, and that if the minister does not confirm a date in which she intends, sorry, I think there's some spelling here, intends to appear by May 23rd, 2024, that the committee, and then the rest of Mr. Desjardins' motion.
All right. Would you just repeat? Sorry, I heard it, but I'm going to ask you to repeat that because I thought that's what you might do. So you're looking to add a couple of lines at the top. Would you repeat that? And I'll ask Mr. Desjardins to pay careful attention. And once you've repeated, just ask a question, Mr. Sabera, do you have your hand up to speak after this? I know Mr. Desjardins does. You might as well. You can get back to me. I'm going to turn to Mr. Desjardins next. But Ms. Shanahan, could you just read that again and then afterwards send it to the clerk?
That the committee request the Minister of Indigenous Services Canada appear before the Standing Committee of Public Accounts regarding the Auditor General's report on Indigenous housing, period, and that if the minister does not confirm a date in which she intends to appear by May 23rd, 2024, that the committee, and then insert.
Go. All right, thank you. So, Mr. Desjardins, that is an amendment to your motion. How do you feel about it? It's in essence giving the minister 2 weeks to give us a date.
Thank you, Chair.
And I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Desjardins. Yeah.
No, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And although I appreciate the motion, I believe the motion has been in effect, and to the effect of what the member just read as an amendment has been the effect of my motion some odd weeks ago. Maybe, Chair, the clerk can read out the date of the original request, the follow-up request subsequently, and I think the member would then see that there's a pattern, and it's clear to me, to which is why I believe the motion, I would reject the amendment. And I'd hope that the member could see that we have provided enough time.
Thank you. So, as I'm prone to do, I'm not going to bring the clerk into our discussions. She is in the process of checking when this motion was passed. And what was done by our committee clerk was to send the minister the invitation with follow-ups. As the clerk does so well, and with me asking as well. I'm not going to put the clerk in this. I'm not going to bring the clerk into this, but she did her job, and I asked about it frequently, and was always told I followed up, and I will do so again. Do you have the date by chance?
Yes, this was adopted before at committee on 11th when we had the 11th of April. When we had the initial meeting on report 2, Housing and First Nations Communities. That was sent the very next morning at 9:28 a.m. and several follow-ups were done until we got our final response on Monday at 6:06 p.m.
Thank you. So there's where things stand. I'm just before, so thank you, Mr. Desjardins. Mr. Sabera, I do see your colleague, Ms. Shanahan, has her hand up. I might have seen your hand before. I just want to double check. But the floor is yours if you would like.
No, I'll put my hand down for the time being until I need to intervene when it's appropriate.
Ms. Shanahan.
Now speaking on the amendment, correct, Chair? So
we are speaking on the amendment. That is correct.
That is right. So, Chair, I think it's. It is, I'm very sorry that it's had to come to this point, but I think we're just trying to put forward in, I think, fairly strong language that we are expecting that the minister provide the committee with an answer. We've provided a date there as well. About appearing before this this committee. I think it's rather almost unprecedented because I believe that it has happened under in a previous government under I would say somewhat more egregious circumstances. But given that members here feel very strongly about the minister appearing, and frankly, in keeping, I think, with the what I like to see as the nonpartisan and more professional and objective proceedings of this committee, that we make it with this amendment. I think we're stating in very strong terms that we expect to see the minister make that. And I have no idea what her schedule is. I have no idea what's on her plate. We're coming to the end of a very busy sitting. She will be appearing at INAN, as has been confirmed by our colleague here, is a member of INAN, Mr. Schmale, and also by the letter that the clerk received, which I think is certainly in the normal course of things. As I say, I regret that it has to come to this, but I think that we're showing on our side in the spirit of working with Mr. Desjardins and other members who seem to feel that that is not sufficient, that the minister appears at INAN, that we will yes.
So I do not like to break up the debate. I am at the risk of losing resources, and if should that happen, we would lose the motion sponsor, and we're discussing the amendment. So I'm going to wind things up. One last note before I look for your agreement. Well, I don't actually need it. I'm out of resources. We have a deadline coming up for the CPAC conference at the end of the summer. I'm going to come back to this soon. Please start thinking if you would like to go to the Public Accounts Conference the end of the summer in Quebec City. We need to put a budget together. On that note, we're out of resources. This meeting is adjourned.